To kick things off, I'm going to ask Eva Primer, who I think had a question from the provision of forest ecosystem services. Eva, could you put your question up, please?
Yes, thank you. So I'm one of the panelists, so I can't use the Q&A function, so I got the opportunity to ask my question. So thanks a lot for all the presentations. It's been wonderful. But my question was earlier on to Sven and Harald, when you were talking about the different incentive structures and how conditionality should be built into the payment mechanism. So oftentimes in policy, we hear that, first of all, we hear in policy discourse that landowners are not rewarded for all the co-benefits that they provide, that they are the providers of all the different good things, but they are not rewarded. So this is what we hear a lot. And on the other hand, we see from very nicely from Helga's and Georg's presentation how there is this polarization of goals. And so it would be nice if you could comment on how we should govern these co-benefits or those forest ecosystem services that come alongside the ones that are easily motivated. And then how should we govern and how do we tailor payments for ecosystem services or governance more broadly for those ecosystem services that have trade-offs with the sort of core motivations?
Thanks, Eva. Who was that? Oh, sorry, Harold, on you go.
Yeah, no, I just give you the start maybe, and then Sven maybe can continue on that. I think the important issue is the scale that has to be considered. And I think that we wanted to stress this also in our presentation, that when we talk about policy, we have the different scales, which was nicely introduced by Georg and Helga, about the EU level, the national level, and then the regional and stand level. And when we try to break down then these policy regulations, these goals, and then we have these conflicts. So then it's, at the end, it's the forest manager or the forest owner who has then to deal with these conflicting policy goals and how to implement this then on the stand level. Because at the end, you have to decide which tree you are going to promote, which tree you're going to harvest, which trees are you going to plant, which kind of management regime you're going to implement. And for that purpose, you would like to translate these EU level goals then to regional and stand level goals. So then it's about the trade-offs, how you deal with that. So I think the key challenge is really how to make sure that we are able in forest management to really consider these conflicting issues on the policy level and make things somehow in a coherent framework so that we can co-create some kind of added benefits for the forest owner, that you can really create also a market for the service that you are providing. So I think it's somehow bottom up and top down. Both approaches are needed. I mean, on the one hand from policy side, and on the other hand also bottom up from forest management side. Maybe Sven, you would also like to add on this question.
Yes, I mean, I fully agree with you here, Harald. I think you also, it's a genuine feature in many pest schemes that when you implement them, you have to somehow balance fairness and reward issues with effectiveness for additionality. And I don't think there's a single answer on exactly where to position yourself, other than if you err on one of the extremes, you're not going to be successful in terms of designing a good pest scheme. I think also in these public pest schemes, you have better options for taking into account a suite of benefits or co-benefits and multiple ecosystem services, etc. In private schemes, that's often more difficult because the private user has a very specific interest and a specific mandate to pay for the incrementality of a specific service. So if we're talking a public forest pest system at the country level, at the EU scale, then you have better option of somehow weaving into such a scheme the multi-objectives that Eva was referring to.
Thanks very much. Next question is from Valentino Govilli again. So Valentino, you have a question, I think, for Maria. I don't think we have.
He's coming. Just entered.
Coming, is he? Okay, thank you. Here he comes.
Hi everyone. Yes,
Hi.
my question was to Mireia. Thank you very much for your very relevant presentation. Yes, I just wanted to know if you think that the characteristics of the people that are involved and their emotions and the role they play in the multi-actor network happen to influence the most the discussion that involves more intangible ecosystem services rather than those that are more tangible. So those ecosystem services which are less tangible and then where values play a more important role, probably because they are less quantifiable. If in this situation, the emotions, the role of the stakeholders, and even the role of the facilitator play a more important role. Thank you.
Thanks, Valentino. Hi, Valentino, and thanks for your question. Well, I think definitely the role of the moderator and the openness of the participants were identified as enable structures to facilitate those processes. So I think you are putting the example between tangibles and intangibles, and I think probably in this debate even it's more relevant. But I will say as lesson learned from this project, it's that the role of the mediator is fundamental. They were talking all about the genuine interest of participating. So also that might play a role when you select your stakeholders for the involvement. So try to select people that has a genuine interest for the participation itself and the process. And also openness, and I guess also space for informal interactions. Some people maybe it will not dare to talk about emotions and intangibles in an open debate, but maybe in an informal way they will also make you available the information that it's important for them. Therefore, it needs to be considered in the planning or in the decision making that involve the project, the process. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much. Great. So thanks very much for that. We're scooting ahead on time, so we're now at the time for the coffee break. So we're going to have another break now. That was quite a long session, just so rich the conversation. I'm glad there's been a lot of discussion on the Q&A as well. So thanks for that. So what I would oh, I see. Oh, we've got a preview already of the incentives for FES provision on the Menti. I was going to say, I think the Mentimeter is still open, so please feel free to keep continuing to contribute, and we'll put that up when we come back after coffee, where we're going to have a more of a kind of interactive panel discussion around this whole topic. So just take 10 minutes now. We'll be back at 5:02. Grab yourself a cup of coffee, have a comfort break or what have you, and I'll see you again at 5:02 for the panel discussion. Thank you very much. Okay, thanks everyone, and welcome back after the break. You'll see we're only just closing the voting on the Mentimeter. So I think we've got some quite clear responses have come through there, with maybe understandable given the topic of this meeting, with a clear first preference for creating markets, second preference for the cap, third for national policies, and then quite a weak support for regional policies and other EU schemes. So and we had 42 people participating, so that's quite interesting. And maybe I can ask our panelists to reflect a bit on that when they get their responses. When they give their responses. So thanks very much for that, Sarah. Great. So now I think on screen, I would like to welcome our panel. We have Eva Müller, who is the Director General for Forest Sustainability and Renewable Resources from the Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture in Germany. Hi, Eva.
Hello.
Hi. And then Fanny Pomlong, who's the Secretary General for the Confederation of European Forest Owners. Hi, Fanny Pom.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi. And last but not least, you've already heard from her, Eva Primer, Professor Eva Primer, who's the Research Director for the Finnish Environment Institute. So welcome, Eva.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi. Great. So thank you all for joining us. And we have an all-woman panel, so this is tremendous. I love this in forestry when we get this. That's very rare. So to start off with then, I've got a question for all of you, and you can take it in which order if you just want to raise your hand in terms of who wants to go first. So the first question is, what is the role of forest ecosystem services in the new EU policy strategies from your point of view? So who would like to start off with that? Okay, Eva, I think you were first with your hand up, Eva Müller. So would you like to go first?
Okay, thank you very much. And thanks also for the invitation to participate in this panel. I think we've already talked a little bit about this in another way. The EU Commission has put forward a number of forest-related policies and strategies under the European Green Deal. And there we have the EU Forest Strategy, the EU Biodiversity Strategy, we have the Taxonomy Regulation, and we have the Fit for 55 package. And all of these strategies highlight the importance of forests in climate protection and in conserving biodiversity, two important ecosystem services. The EU Forest Strategy also emphasizes the role of wood and non-wood products and other forest uses such as ecotourism in achieving the objective of a climate neutral and circular EU economy, in particular their role in the bioeconomy. Now, having said this, and here I come back to what Georg Winkel and Helga Pülzer said before about the ideological dichotomy, because these different ecosystem services are not given the same weight in these initiatives. And we could even say that there are some contradictions. And I really like the slide that Georg showed, of the different positions. We see that very clearly, because on the one hand, it is acknowledged in these strategies that the use of wood is important for storing CO2 and for reducing emissions. On the other hand, there are strict protection targets, especially in the biodiversity and also reflected in the forest strategy, that will mean setting aside large areas of forest for protection where no wood harvesting will take place. And if this is carried through, it may actually result in a reduction of timber harvesting of over 40% by 2050 in the EU. We've had one of our scientific institutes do a little study on this, and this is what they came up with. And this in turn will then lead to leakage effects, that is import of wood into the EU that may not come from sustainably managed sources. So I think in the discussions of the strategies that are currently taking place, it's very important that we find a balanced approach that really gives the same weight to these ecosystem services. I must also say that some other ecosystem services like recreation, water regulation, and so on are not really the focus of these strategies. They focus very strongly on biodiversity and on climate. Just a last word. Last year, Germany had the presidency of the EU Council, and we already, together with the other member states, provided council conclusions that were supposed to give orientation to the Commission on these, the new EU forest strategy. And the member states already requested in those council conclusions to work closely with the member states and to give equal weight to the 3 dimensions of sustainability.
Thank you very much, Eva. I'm gonna chair's privilege. I'm just gonna ask you a question then on that. Those council conclusions went to the Commission. Were they listened to?
I would say they were not listened to sufficiently, and some of the when the EU forest strategy was published, some of the member states, including Germany, also reminded the Commission that these Council conclusions exist and they should be taken into account more strongly.
Thank you very much. Okay, Eva, I think you had your hand up next.
Yes, my Zoom functionalities are those of a web participant, anyway, or a browser participant. I wanted to say a thing that goes a bit back from, like, looking back at the strategies that we had prior to those that Eva Müller nicely lined out that are the new current ones. So we already had a range of strategies that were touching upon forest ecosystem services before these new ones that came out now. And in comparisons of those strategies, we have seen that the forest sector or the forest strategy is one of the most comprehensive ones. So it is an area in which the policy is very multifunctional and looks at very many different dimensions of the ecosystem as compared to some other strategies. And at the same time, we see exactly this already before in analysis of the previous strategies, bioeconomy strategy, forest strategy, and biodiversity strategy. We see what Eva Müller describes, that the biodiversity and climate goals are somehow recognized, and the other goals, other ecosystem services, even erosion control or like ecosystem services that we can find very important, they are not recognized to a similar degree. So perhaps just signaling that they are not as global or as not touching everyone in the similar, kind of with similar weight. So that's what I would want to say about before the current strategies. But with the current strategies, and particularly the forest strategy, I wanted to draw attention to this, that the strategy takes forest ecosystems at the center, the resilience and health of forests, and what benefits that taking care of the forests brings to the society. So it does take a very sort of ecosystem-oriented approach. Having said that, there is very well what Helga and Georg described about the dichotomy of the different approaches, and what Eva Müller also just said. This is very present, that you have a good recognition of the range of ecosystem services, and you still don't have a very sort of clear portfolio of what to do with each of those. And I could later then perhaps describe what is somehow expected to be done about the different ecosystem services.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So we'll maybe come back to that a bit later on. Thank you for that. Fanny Pum.
Thank you. I don't have much to add because I think that the two first speakers covered most of my points about the fact that about this unbalance that we observe today in EU policy developments. It's interesting to read with the new EU forest strategy. When you read the introduction, it does recognize the role of forest, all these ecosystem services. So one could say, oh, it's a good starting point. All the functions of forest are there. But then you look at the boxes where the actions are listed, and then you get a bit lost compared to all these great roles that forest can play in the intro. You see the boxes which are really biodiversity and carbon sink oriented, a bit of ecotourism. We still wonder how this will work. So if you look at the actions, there is absolutely no action to support the economic functions of forests, as if the productive functions of forests was per se negative. And this is one of our big criticism. But then what is also interesting, if I can open a bit, it is written in the strategy that we should help forest owners to provide ecosystem services. So here, payment for ecosystem services. So here we could say, oh, great, we're going to be supported, the ones that I represent. But again, when you look at more details, they would be supported only for services related to biodiversity and carbon sink. And if you look at the instruments, financial instruments that are proposed, they are absolutely not fit for purpose. And we can come back to that in the discussion. And I think it was mentioned in one of the earliest presentations to say there is a discrepancy between the nice political attention and the concrete tools which are really at the service of those who can provide these services. So it's a political document. It's showing a certain political trend that we do not support. And it was interesting to read also in the poll that other sources of support was number 5, I think, including EU. And actually, this is what the EU is proposing in the forest strategy. Like, for example, carbon farming. It's among these other, which doesn't seem to be the most appropriate tool according to the poll today. But we can come back to that.
Okay. Yes. Take a note so that we come back to that. Okay, so that's the kind of, thank you, that's the kind of discussion around this kind of that high level EU policy and the tensions within it. Similar to you, Eva, I was putting a bit, I love that slide that Georg showed with the dichotomy in it. It's just, I feel like I'm living and breathing it every day at the moment whenever I talk about forest policy, and these contrasting values that we have between different stakeholders set, and doesn't seem to be a desire to try and bridge across it. So I think that's the next challenge, is to find a way to bridge across it. Okay, so moving on a bit from so we've talked about the policy framework and what is or isn't working at the EU level. What about the demand and supply of forest economic services is it in balance, the forest ecosystem services across Europe? We've had a couple of presentations right at the start. I think particularly from, I just remember I can see the picture from Marco about this supply and demand being in balance. So what are your views on the balance of supply and demand of forest ecosystem services? And Fanny Pom was quick off the mark getting her hand up. So, so you're up first, then Eva, and then Eva.
I'm happy to start because I was very interested in what has been said in the previous presentations about that. First of all, I think it's important to remind that as a forest owner, when you manage your forest and your long-term planning, the objective is to answer as much as possible to all the demands from society. And it's true that these demands are growing. The expectations, the level of expectations from society is growing. And this is something that forest owners have to take into consideration. But there is something important, because now I have the feeling that we are discussing about something new, but it's not new. Because forest owners have been providing forest ecosystem services for decades, and most of them for free. So one example that I usually take when I speak in public is since 1950, the carbon stored in forest, in EU forest, has doubled while developing a wood market. So all this carbon which has been stored in the forest area, which has increased, was done by the work of forest owners, and it was not paid, right? It was, I mean, it was not something which was financially incentivized. So purification, filtering of water, clean air, all these functions today, it's already happening. And so it's not new. And there is a survey from one of our members who calculated that actually in his forest, if you look at 100% is the benefits that the forest provide, he gets 20% in terms of money, and then 80 is for free. So that's something that we need to take into account when we talk about this balance. Also, something important, we also need to discuss a balance among the demands, because now we are discussing balance between supply and demand, but among the demands, because some people in society, they want the forest to be left alone and to grow and to live nature. But at the same time, they would be the ones requesting more wood for their housing, for toys for their children, wooden toys, so they want to consume more wood. So sometimes there may also be some discrepancies between the different demands, or you want to have a better recreational area to go walking and have nice time, but this cannot happen in a forest which is left unmanaged. So I think it's also interesting to discuss about the differences between the balance between the different demands before discussing about the balance between supply and demand. And then, of course, these questions about supply and demand really depends on local circumstances. I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all to this answer to this question, because it really depends on which forest you are talking about, which country, which region, what are the challenges of the forest. And of course, these balance between supply and demand can vary from one forest to another, and also can vary depending on the choices of management from the forest owners. But it's difficult to say yes or no, there is a balance or not. It's really locally adapted. So just for first elements, first food for thoughts.
Thanks very much. Yes, and then you throw in top of that the point that Mireia was making is about the way that people value different things varies from location to location. Again, what might be in balance in one place might not be in balance in another place as well. So yes, so that always geography is really important. Okay, Eva, what have you got to say on this point?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to continue from what Fanny Pom said now, and also as an answer to the previous question on. So I think that the policy, so or maybe I go back one more step. I say that the unclarity that Fanny Pom nicely described in the forest strategy, that is that there are some quite like strict principles, there's nice description and all of that discrepancy. It comes from this, that the forest strategy is so reliant on the other policies because the forest mandate is so much weaker. And some strong countries, my country included, also wants to keep the forest strategy fairly weak, which I don't know if in the European terms, whether that is favorable for European forest policy. But it would be more coherent if there was a forest policy mandate. But then when you look at somehow justification of why would you have policy, you have policy to correct market failures. So if if timber is coming out of the forest and reaching the market, we don't need to correct much there. So I understand if there is less policy oriented in that way. And I actually think that when there are then the climate change adaptation or the resilience type statements and notions in the strategy, they are very important for economics, because this is where your huge losses can come, and where actually at the European level we need to have loyalty if they are very geographically unevenly distributed, these losses that come with climate change. So that is a very important economic aspect. But I would then say that about with this, that I think the role of policy is to correct what's not working in the society, or steer the society in a direction, and also recognize things that work well, which I think are done quite nicely in the forest strategy. We have serious challenges with biodiversity conservation and with climate change, and that's what the strategy takes to upfront quite in novel ways. I don't think that this was in forest policy 10 or 15 or 20 years ago at all, and now we have this upfront, and that is a signal that somehow that the societal demand is being communicated via the policy. Well, whether that then translates to demand in market terms, so that there would be supply and demand of forest ecosystem services in the forest or in the regional at the regional scale, it doesn't at all. So I think that the policy is very weak in really putting up markets. And I think that we have heard really nice presentations today about this, how cumbersome it is to develop forest payments for forest ecosystem services or new markets, or to channel that demand. That we see that there's huge societal demand, just like Fanny Pom described that the forest owners are experiencing, but there is no way of channeling that demand to something that would be then a market, a supply market.
Thanks very much. Yes, I love that description. This noble recognition of biodiversity and climate. You know, those two crises, that maybe explains, Fanny Pom, why that gets so much dominance in the strategy. And I think this issue that we're all alive to, and I see in some of the chat it's been raised about EU competence, and so the weakness on the forest side, and yet so many other policies where the EU does have legislative competence, there's a gap in the middle that's forestry, and that's what the forest strategy is trying to fill. But the levers are weak, no question, and that's one of the challenges that we've got to face. Okay, Eva Muller, what would you like to say on this?
I just wanted to add another angle to this, building on what Fanny said about the balance depending on circumstances, on local circumstances. And I think we don't, in Germany and in many other European countries, we do not have a balance anymore. And that is because of climate change. We in Germany have seen, and I think in other European countries that has been the case as well, devastating effects of climate change related extreme weather events and insect attacks in our forests. In Germany alone, we lost close to 300,000 hectares of forests that have to be restored. And overall, we need to work on making our forests more climate resilient. The forests are still a carbon sink, but it is projected that due to climate change, they may become a carbon source in the future. And so that will affect the supply. And this brings significant challenges to the forest owners and managers in their ability to continue to provide the ecosystem services for forest to society that they have been providing for free, because in the past, our forest owners have been able to cover their management costs by generating income through timber sales. And now, you know, we have forest owners who have lost basically all their forests and they have to restore them, reforest. They don't have any income anymore. So this, I think, is the time where we seriously have to start thinking about payments for ecosystem services. We need to maintain our forests for climate protection. That is absolutely sure. In Germany, we cannot reach our climate goals without forests. So we need to make sure that all our forests continue to be managed and continue to be healthy. And we need to support the forest owners by rewarding them, by acknowledging and recognizing financially the ecosystem services that they have been providing for free.
So Fanny Pom, yeah, do you want to come back on that?
Sorry, just 3 short points with what I heard. I totally agree with what has been said by Mrs. Müller about the crisis, the climate change and the biodiversity crisis, and the fact that it's a noble attention. I think that no forest owners would oppose to that, because as it was rightly mentioned, actually forest owners are suffering from climate change. The problem that we are having regarding the approach is more with the general approach and the tone, as okay, what has been done until now is not good. We need to fix it, and let's go closer to nature, and we're going to help you. And we say that's a bit too simplistic. So that's a bit the approach, because the noble attention, I think no one can be against, but it's not because you want to protect biodiversity and increase your carbon sink that you cannot do also productive functions of the forest. And also it's a bit like, oh, now we're going to start taking care of biodiversity as if it hadn't been done before, which is also something which is really bothering us, because actually biodiversity protection is part of management. So that was just a clarification. About the common forest policy, there is no common forest policy, that's for sure, but it's not a reason for not having a coherence among the policies which impact forest. They are what we call forest-related policies, biodiv taxonomy, forest strategy, RED 3, you name them. It's not because we don't have a common forest policy that the Commission cannot seek for a coherence. So, and we don't have such coherence. And last but not least, I really much agree with what has been said about the work that has been done until now and that is not recognized. And you can request today, the society can request more biodiversity, more recreational areas, but what is missing in the debate is the work needed to deliver these services. No one is mentioning this work, or very few people actually.
Thank you. Eva, you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I wanted to just agree with Fanny Pom that I think that, and also Eva Müller said this, that I think that it's, there is a fair bit of this kind of like accusational tone that's perhaps described nicely in this Helga's and Georg's analysis that shows polarization of the discourses. But still, when you have the polarization and you're searching for that coherence, you wouldn't need to have such an accusing tone. That it is really surprising. I mean, we can see that biodiversity is in decline, and our science and our inventories show that. We can see the dramatic consequences of climate change, but this shouldn't take away exactly what you are saying, both of you other panelists, that we should recognize what has been done up until now, what the scenarios would be like if we didn't have all those activities that have been done for forest sustainability already up until now.
Thanks. Yeah, it's I think that this point about language and this tone, you both mentioned tone there, and this dichotomy is leading to polarization and languages developing on either side of the pole that then sounds very accusatory coming back the other way. And I think some of the points that Mireia made about how to tackle that, how to get mediation, how to find that space in the middle so you pull the poles in. I think that's a very rich area and it's so badly needed. I also like that description of we might not have a common forestry policy, but we need a coherent one. And yeah, my take is we aren't really quite there yet at all. And that's not just at the EU level. I mean, so I'm based in the UK, but I'm doing work with the Irish government at the moment. It's happening at all scales. This polarization is tricky. Okay, so coming on to the next question now then, which is, so we've talked a bit about the difficulties and the challenges and the range of EU policies and strategies that are affecting forestry. We've talked about the demand and supply. So if you had a magic wand and you could say, what action do you think is needed and what are the biggest challenges for tackling this issue? And I think particularly maybe this bridging the polarization of the debate that's going on. So what action and what are the key challenges? Who would like to go first on that? Okay, Eva.
I can say small things. I don't know if I can empty any kind of pots here, but so I think that for what we see a little bit like that there is this accusation or there is this nasty tones as well about the forest strategy at some times. It has very much to do with the forest sector traditionally in my country, in Finland, in Europe, and globally being quite a professionally run sector and quite isolated in that sense. We have a professional language. We are foresters. We know what cubic meters mean type language, and this that comes with the kind of professional ownership of the topic. And I think that what would really need to be done would be to open open the debate. I think that the sustainable forest management, sustainability, increasing actions with payments, so that we would do what Sven was showing, that sometimes you have to constrain your activity in the forest and sometimes you have to modify it. It was really nicely described what needs to be done. For opening what needs to be done, the forest sector has to open up. The forest sector has to, and forestry sector in some ways has to enter a dialogue, which I think it doesn't very much. That there is that the forest sector says that, oh no, these are so complex and we need timber provision anyway, and somehow there is a little bit of an insulation between the forest sector and the society. So I think that that's like the very, very, very big thing that needs to be done. But other things that we would need are somehow, and maybe they're connected to that, would be to really directly talk about who is to lose and who is to gain in what settings. So I think that the forest sector has a tendency to claim that the forest owners are the losers and that they are in a key role, when sometimes it is actually forestry administration or forest industry that has a role, and it could be the local land use authorities, and we should somehow be a bit more open about who is the actor in which situation. And these are, of course, both of my suggestions are quite demanding, because they would mean bringing a lot of new complexity to the discussion that we have had up until now.
So on that, Eva, I'm just going to push you a bit on it. Is there anything that we can learn, say, from the agricultural sector, who's been kind of going round and round in circles on this for decades? Do you think there's anything that we can learn from that journey?
From agricultural sector. So I think that the agricultural sector is interesting because in the way that Fanny Pom said, that a lot of people want building material or wood for toys, or in Finland we often say toilet paper, that everyone needs toilet paper. Nowadays you could say coffee cups, but that people want the products. They're still not as intuitive as food is for everyone. Food is so fundamental that it is easier to open the kind of chain of what we need and what there is, and people understand packaging and that sort of thing. And with forest sector, there is more communication that we need to do, and that's one thing. And then another thing that with the EU has got quite locked in as well with the common agriculture policy. That maybe there is something that we can learn, but sometimes it's not positive lessons. We could learn to avoid some of the mistakes that have been made in the agricultural policy that's very, very path dependent.
Thank you. Eva.
I think one of the biggest issues we have, the biggest challenges we have, is indeed this ideological dichotomy. I mean, we see that everywhere, also in Germany, between the foresters and the environmentalists. And one of the problems is that this debate has become very emotional. And it is very difficult to argue with science and fact in a science and fact-based way. It's just not heard. We've tried this many times. We've had our scientists that work with us with the ministry give statements, explanations, provide the facts, but the public doesn't want to hear it. The public prefers to hear, or there is one particular author in Germany who has become very famous, who is now called the Pope of Forestry, because he's managed in a very emotional way to capture the attention of the public with mystifying the forests and making them almost human. Mm-hmm. And maybe we should learn something from him, because we have not been able to convince others, the environmentalists, and even the public with science and fact-based arguments. So I think that there is a big challenge on how to communicate. And we foresters are also very fact-based, I would say, in general, and we are proud of our science, but we're not that good at communicating. So when Eva said the forest sector needs to open up, I think we have to learn how to better communicate our messages so that they don't only reach those who have, from the environmental side, but also the general public, and make the general public understand why we need a balanced approach to forests and why we cannot just talk about biodiversity conservation, but that the productive role of forests is quite as important as the others.
Thanks. Yes, this you can't use science to persuade somebody who's coming from an emotional perspective, and the other way around. Emotions won't persuade a scientist either. So that's how do we get into that? And that ties in, I think, this professionalization, the engineering basis for forestry does create a difficulty in having conversations with people who come from a different perspective, different discipline. I'm going to have to look up this Pope of the Forest. That sounds intriguing, if there's any of it in English. Yeah, Eva, are you wanting to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to add, I thought the one narrative that the forest sector could use that is emotional as well, that the food sector and the agriculture probably is doing quite well, is this kind of caring that there is this forester who provides the wood, that the wood is the trees are felled, but then the trees are cut into these pieces that are made into our houses, that chain would be described in somehow a bit traditionalist ways, like it is done in the food sector. Food is very industrial these days, but we still see this kind of, the narrative is this sole landowner, farmer who is walking on his fields and patting his sheep, which can happen, but like it's a very small part of the food chain. So maybe we should look into this kind of smaller scale value chains in forestry and how they could actually support perhaps the more industrial ways as well. And then I would just remind this, and then be humble that if there is a sustainability challenge or a conservation challenge or a climate challenge, I don't think those should be denied. That I think that at the same time, the forest sector has to be pretty open to science that comes from outside the sort of forestry area.
Fanny Plum, as a representative of the forestry sector in Europe, have you got anything that you'd like to come in on all of that?
Yeah, I noted a lot of things. Maybe I will react to what has been said. First of all, about the fact that the forest sector is somehow closed and maybe needs to engage more into a dialogue and be humble. I think that we cannot disagree with that. We would agree, and at least at EU level, I cannot comment at national level, but I can tell you that CEPF, we have answered to all the consultations that the Commission put forward, and we had, I don't know how many with this Green Deal, these roadmaps, this online questionnaire. We always replied. We are a member of this working group on forest and nature together with NGOs and member states. We take our seat. We are there, we comment. But the dialogue, it has to be in two directions, because for the dialogue to work, you need to have at least the feeling that at least part of what you're saying is being listened to. And over the last months, I don't want to comment on, the history, but at least what I could see over the last months with the preparation of the Green Deal, it seems that the concerns and the worries and the hopes of the forest owners, because we've been pushing for a new EU forest strategy, we really wanted this document to go out, have not been heard or listened to. So the dialogue is difficult, and I totally agree when you say that it's becoming really emotional. I heard last week an EU official comparing the forest sector to the car industry. Forest is the new car, and we can further develop on that. Before the forest strategy was published, we heard NGOs comparing the forest sector to the tobacco or oil industry as liars. So a dialogue in these circumstances is a bit difficult, and so what we say is, I think forest owners are ready to be humble to address the concerns about the balanced science and facts. I think there is no problem to comment on a study which is highlighting some challenges for the forest sector. We know they are, but then the counterpart should be to also look at the studies which are highlighting good things, which we are missing in the debate today. So it's difficult to be humble when you have the feeling that the all bunches of inputs which are put into the debate is not balanced. So what is needed? Dialogue to continue for sure, because we are really crystallized position, emotions. So we need to talk to each other. I think something very important, if we want things to further develop, is what we call the prior and informed consent of forest owners. Whatever the policy that you want to implement, new actions related to biodiversity, to carbon. We are talking, at least for those who are represented, about private property. So if a dialogue is the first step to a prior and informed consent of forest owners, and we saw good examples earlier on this afternoon of projects which are really successful because there is a dialogue. Forest owners are really interested to get in. We even saw a project where forest owners were not remunerated for what they were doing. So I think that this consent and this respect of the private forest ownership, if forest owners feel that they are not forced, but have the choice and can be possibly also remunerated for the loss of income, this is the key for a success. So dialogue and respect property rights, and prior and informed consent and voluntary approach.
Great, thank you. So that's been a really kind of interesting discussion here. And what I'm going to do now is to maybe engage with some of the presenters from today, because there's been a very active discussion in the chat bar on the side, and there are a couple of questions coming through, and some views to come in. So I'm going to ask some questions first, and then if any of the other presenters would like to say something, just put something into the chat for me. But heads up, Gerhard, I'm going to come to you first because you had a question about the forestry, not a question, a comment maybe, or a topic on the forest strategy in terms of member state and policy documents. So are you there, and would you like to make your point? I'm just looking on the screen. I've got a feeling Gerhard's gone.
Gerhard is gone, unfortunately.
Oh, Geisha, thank you. All right, so I won't go there. Bo, I know you're still there. So Bo Thorson, I think you had a couple of points that you would like to make, and I know I can rely on you. So maybe you'd like to add to the discussion.
Yeah, so I think maybe most of my comments, all of them could be bunched under this headline that foresters and forest scientists, like those here and forest policy people, very regularly talk to each other, and more rarely to the other guys and girls and others and so on. So and that's why I completely understand and recognize, as Fanny Pomm said, that why can't the policies, even if there is not a mandate on forest policy, why can't other forest affecting policies be kind of coordinated? But that's because they're designed to many purposes in my head, and we can't, in my way, we're trying to eat the cake and have it, I think. A bit like Brexit. No. And if we don't want to have the EU to take responsibility for the forest sector as a fully fledged EU policy area domain, then we will have to live with the fact that policies that are in other areas targeting other policy targets will affect us and will not have us as their main target. So there's no domain for the EU to make policies with the forest sector as a main target. So we can complain about that, but we also wanted that. I think at least many forest countries wanted that originally. And that said, I also agree with Eva Primmer that one might maybe shouldn't look too much to the agricultural sector when we are talking about rewarding forest owners for loss of income. We don't want, or do we want, maybe that's a question actually to the panel, should we want forest owners' income to be a policy concern of the EU and the European Parliament in the way that farmers' income and land values are a policy concern of the European Parliament and Commission? I know I myself involved with the private forest owners quite a lot in Denmark, and they actually have a heated debate about that, about not wanting that, because some of the CAP instruments now allow single payments to go to forest areas and forested areas. And that's a huge ideological change for them. So that's some words from me. So should we go the agricultural way and just ask for some income replacements?
Any thoughts on that, panel? Panipom and then Eva.
I can start. The question that you have just put is a rather complex and sensitive one. I would say that now, at least for as far as we are concerned, there is no such push from our side to have a common forest policy following the model of the common agricultural policy with the payments. We keep repeating that as far as the forest sectors is concerned, we want the market to play its role. And this is one of the arguments that we also bring when we discuss about payment for ecosystem services. It's not either market or being paid for providing other services. Both can go together. But I did not really agree with the fact that you said, well, if we don't have a common forest policy, we will keep having this diverging tools because we will have diverging policies. What we have observed in the past, at least before the Green Deal started to be implemented, we had an EU forest strategy, which was kind of chapeau, umbrella, which recognized sustainable forest management definition, criteria, indicators, and which set a kind of direction. And then we had some policies being developed, and okay, they were not totally coherent, but they were somehow a coherence with this previous strategy, or at least more than what we have with the current one, because the current strategy, what we really expected was to ensure this to be this umbrella to cover all these other policies, to walk into the same direction, to give a kind of strategical orientation. And if you look at the strategy today, it is probably very coherent with the biodiv strategy or with the LULUCF regulation, but it's not absolutely coherent with the bioeconomy strategy, with the industrial strategy. So I do not really agree that we absolutely need a common forest policy to have a certain coherence, because you can still have some tools. And this is the role in the Commission of the Secretariat General, normally, to ensure that policies are not going in too many diverging directions. And unfortunately, this is what we observe today.
Thank you, Eva.
Yes, so I think that anyway, the new forest strategy is fairly well in coherence with the Green Deal spirit and the Green Deal policies. So maybe that is the EU policy coherence is going in that direction. And I think that the sustainability challenges that we have needs that. And what we need then in the forest sector is to demonstrate what forestry practices are actually advancing sustainability and what are some things that we need to modify. Well, whether then that modification should be or doing more of the same perhaps, or also whether they should be paid for, it is pretty clear what Bo just asked, that we won't have the money, that there is no budget for such thing that we would pay for all the nice things that we would want, unless we make very dramatic changes in the other side of the damager and harm doer side, where then the forest industry will be like in the dual role, because they are participating in sustainable forest management in some ways. There are a lot of nice sustainability activities and practices. But then on the other hand, industry, when it is very when forestry is efficient, it will for sure be judged to be detrimental for sustainability. So this is a very, 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 very complicated issue. But I think, like I have said before, I think we should discuss this and we should bring these problems to the table. And this is what we should solve. So I don't think we should avoid these really difficult issues at all.
So how should we go about, oh, sorry, Fanny Pom, you had your hand up, yes.
Sorry, one comment about the fact that the forest strategy is in line with the Green Deal. Yes and no. Yes, due to the nature protection and climate objective, but Green Deal is also about green growth. Green Deal is also about mitigating climate change. And mitigating climate change with forest is not only through enhancing carbon sink, it's also through storage and substitution. So on that, I would challenge the fact that the forest strategy is 100% coherent with the Green Deal. It depends which objective of the Green Deal you're looking at.
Yes, I think the storage and substitution point is definitely work in progress, isn't it, in terms of getting that, people recognizing that, and this leakage, the exportation of the problem is if we don't resolve this, we're just going to import more and more timber, and you'll be in the situation the UK is in, which isn't great. So yes. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of conversation. The conversation seems to have been about how to move this conversation on from this polarized basis, how to bring people together. And we talked about the use of stories. Something we haven't talked about, I don't think, is about the different, who are these other people that we want to bring in? Who are the bridge builders? Who could span between these two, this dichotomy? So who are those people that are comfortable in the middle space that we might be able to reach out to or to bring into the conversation? Any thoughts on that? I'll open that up to the wider group as well, because there was some conversation in the sidebar about storytellers and what have you. Any thoughts from anybody around the Zoom room on who could help us here?
I could just say from other perspective, I'm at the Finnish Environment Institute where we study other systems than the forest system as well, like urban and energy systems and so on, where difficult lock-ins have opened when the system becomes a little bit more sort of like there is more innovation, is when you start to look at the service that the kind of final service that people are after. So you would then engage those who are benefiting from climate change mitigation, or who are benefiting from the different products that the forest sector uses. So you would engage more of those end users, because them then understanding what they rely on, well, how they rely on the forest ecosystem actually then producing all these goods and benefits, that would be very helpful. So actually going down in the value chain much further away from the forest and trying engaging those.
Thank you. Harold.
Yeah, just a short comment, because who could help? What I think, what is my concern, that it's not somebody who could help. I think the most important thing is that we need this team of different disciplines and expertise that can deal with this complex issue. So we heard about scientific evidences. We talked about transparency, we talked about political issues, we talked about stakeholder engagement. So there's a need of a set of different tools, methods, techniques, competencies in order to deal with that issue. So that's why I think it's very important that such, like in these two projects that we are currently discussing, like in Sincere Nobel, we have this kind of interdisciplinarity of the researchers engaged in that and bringing in the different competencies in order then to make things happen, because you have these different perspectives and you have these different competences in different ways in order to make these innovation solutions.
Thank you. Maria.
Yeah, I mean, Harold's comments goes along the lines I wanted to comment, and maybe also to make things on the ground. I think when we deal with ideologies, it's very difficult sometimes to reach a consensus. But when you go down to the forest and you discuss different management plans, and sometimes it's just a tiny difference in management that can bring an extra input in biodiversity or an extra input in water. I think it's more about going to the ground and involving everybody, not only, as Harald was saying, so not only the producers, but also the end users. And a lot of pedagogy needs to be done. I think that's also a very good opportunity to communicate. We were talking the problems of forestry, communicating the benefits. I think it can solve, or it can help so many gaps we have in our work we are doing, and help to unlock the ideology debate into more common sense ground.
Thank you. Eva.
Funny maybe saying the same thing, but I think we also need to listen to the forest owners more. We have millions of small forest owners all over Europe who are confronted with the challenges of generating some income from their forests, but at the same time meeting the expectations that society puts on the forest, making sure that people can walk in their forests on the weekends, and that the roads are okay, and the forests are safe, and there are no trees falling on their heads. And listening to their concerns and their stories and their real situation on the ground might help.
Thanks. Fanny Pom.
I very much agree with these comments about bringing people from the ground, because sometimes I have the feeling, as far as I'm concerned, that in this EU bubble, we are only people not working on the ground, and it's like a theater mode, right? You have your points and you raise your points, and then you know in advance what the others is going to tell you, and that's part of our work. But going back to a dialogue with people from the ground would really help. Also, something that I would find interesting as far as this EU bubble is concerned, because we need to talk to each other to make these policy developments moving forward, is I agree very much with what has been said, these different disciplines, how they can help with this dialogue. And maybe what we would need is a discussion off the record, to be really to rebuild trust, to be able to really share all our thoughts, disappointments, shocks of what we heard, hopes, without being afraid that the others would use it, against, because that's the situation in which we are, and this takes time, but I think discussion off the records, maybe get into a room, get a key, throw the keys through the window and say nothing is recorded, and you can just discuss whatever you want. I would be very interested in that. Whether that's possible or not, I don't know. But of course, for this to happen, I think we need some mediators, which can be scientists from different disciplines. We need people to help to build the bridge, for sure.
Yeah, thanks, Fanny Pom. I mean, there's two reflections, if I may, on that. This off the record thing, I've been working in Ireland where this has exploded, and this dichotomy has exploded massively. And I did exactly that. I had 40-hour-long off the record discussions with all the stakeholders where it wasn't recorded and nothing was attributed. And you just got so much more constructive conversation, and also the other thing is get out to have the conversation in the woods, and it's amazing how much better things seem to flow if you actually get out of the theatre and into the trees. Often works really well as well. So thank you for that. I'm just going to take a little pause here because then I'm going to wrap up, but we do have a final Menti that I'm just going to get going while we move into the final stage. So I'm hoping that Sarah and Geisha behind the scenes are going to put this up. So we have another little Menti, which what I would like you to do is to just put up one word that's resonated with you or stuck with you or that captures today's topics and discussion. So somebody's going already. So just put those up, and what we'll do is while I'm wrapping up, we'll develop a little word cloud. We've still got 60 odd participants here, so we should hopefully get at least 60 words. If you want to put more than one word up, you'll have to log in twice, so we can't put a sentence in, but you could put more than one word in if you sneakily go in more than once. Great, so that's all starting to happen. Forest Pope, yes, that's here. Great, okay, Fanny Pum, I just think you've still got your hand up. Was there one more point that you were wanting to make? Okay, that's fine. Okay, so thanks everyone for this. This has just been a great and it's been a great mix of science presentations from researchers, from the science community, from policymakers and from practitioners, and that's exactly what this is all about. We've heard about, obviously, about the definitions of forest ecosystem services, about the Nobel and Sincere project. We had an overview of forest ecosystem services in Europe. I loved some of the words that I would be typing up if I hadn't. Funeral forests. This was a new one for me, but I think there's definitely something in that. And I think at one stage I saw naked cross-country skiing appeared on somebody's slide, but we didn't get into it. So I think that would be an interesting one to go up as well as an ecosystem service. So we had an overview. We heard from Marco and Gerhard about the overview of forest ecosystem services in Europe, discussions around the variation spatially and in values. We heard about innovations in terms of ways to use financial and economic systems to pay for these kind of things. Then we moved into the provision side of things. We heard from Sven about an interesting dissection of the word services and whether that's actually a misnomer, where we're actually producing goods as well as services. And we heard from Harold and Bart and Bo about these various mechanisms like the reverse auctions. I must say, I got a bit lost between a reverse auction being turned inside out. I think that was just, that was a bit mind-blowing, but really fascinating in terms of the results that were coming from that. I think that was from Logan. We then also heard about policies, and I think that slide about articulating the dichotomy that we heard from Georg and Helga, and then Mireille's points, which I think were really coming out in the panel discussion there about how to actually have these difficult conversations where you've got people with different values, different languages, and different issues being brought to the table. And even different cultural backgrounds as well in all of that. And then a great panel conversation at the end, which really was getting into this, and particularly the tensions, obviously, around the forestry strategy. Is it coherent? Isn't it? And were the tensions between the two different sizes coming out there? But I think it was a really good, rich discussion. I think Bo made some really good points about how we should embrace this emotions versus science. We shouldn't just throw our hands up about it. There's absolutely ways to do it. And this bringing in people who can mediate. Mediation is a skill. There are people who can mediate. There are all sorts of techniques. Chatham House, somebody's mentioned, Fanny Pom said, let's throw away the key, open the window and have an honest discussion without being worried about it being, us being called out on Twitter about it, for example. The dialogue without things being thrown back, so people can be a bit more open. And then I think finally that point, and I know this is common in FE type discussions, but you made the point, Ava, very clearly about you've got to listen to the people on the ground, because there's work that needs to be done here. Otherwise we're just talking in circles to ourselves. Work needs to be done, and we absolutely have to engage with the players in that, and particularly the forest owners. Okay, so thanks very much for all of that. We have our little word cloud here. Communications, absolutely slap bang in the center, and dialogue, emotions and science, mediation, transparency coming up very strongly here. and Forest Pope. I'm going to go away and Google that. If somebody can send me the German for it, so I might go to the right place. I'm interested to see what that's there. So thanks very much, everybody, for staying with us. I think we've got 60 people who've made it through to the end, which is really good. It just stands to me now to pass over to Harold again, Patrick, to close today and maybe set things up for tomorrow. So Harold, over to you.
Thanks a lot. I think the keyword that was now in the center of the word cloud communication is a very good bridge for tomorrow, because the sessions 2 and 3 are basically meant to support this interaction and this communication. On the one hand, focusing on the practitioners, and on the other hand, focusing also on business cases. So first, I would like, for the closing words, I would like to thank Johara for guiding us through the whole afternoon. I think it was really great, the way how you moderated this tight program. And I would also like to thank all the presenters and the panelists who engaged in the presentations and in the discussions and made this really an interesting afternoon with many insights on the provision of forest ecosystem services. And especially also some thanks to the people in the back, actually, who made all these things work. So just to mention a few of them, I think I will forget for sure some: Sarah, Pia, Geshe, Dimitri, and all the others who actually worked in the back a lot in order to facilitate the technical issues to make this conference for the first day a success. And I think we will nicely continue for tomorrow. And I would like to make an advertisement, as I said, for these 2 sessions that we are focusing tomorrow. On the one hand, we'll have these practical innovation cases on our both projects in Sincere and Nobel. And the interesting thing is that we discussed a lot about how to engage actors in co-designing, testing, and evaluating these different mechanisms. And I think it's now very nice also to get these people on the in our discussion and learn these lessons that they have gained from these different mechanisms, whether auctions or voluntary payments or fees, how these can really be implemented, these cases. And I think we can then convey all these experiences and lessons learned from these different initiatives and have some interactive discussions. And in session 3, we will then focus on these business cases, where we have also then very interesting flash talks from our both projects, guiding us through these different innovative mechanisms. And we heard a lot today already about the reviews, the studies that have been done on case study level, on European-wide level. And these impulse presentations will also present a lot of experiences and help us to better understand what we can learn from science and how we can translate this also to policy and to practitioners. As we have then a panel of experts from businesses, finance, and forest owners to discuss then also these issues. It was a long afternoon, so that's why I would not like to spend more time on closing words. Just again, a big thank to all who made this possible, and an invitation to also participate tomorrow in our discussions. Thanks, Joe.